In the name of God, Assalamu alaikum to my brothers and sisters in Iraq in the University of Basrah. Are you hearing my voice?
Yes, we are hearing.
Okay, thanks. Do you prefer for sharing my webcam, or I think if I share my webcam and my picture, the quality of the communication will reduce. So if you let me, I just keep the webcam turned off, and just you can just have my voice. Okay, is it okay for you?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for attending the session. I'm Haleh Amintoosi, assistant professor at Ferdowsi University of Mashhad, Iran, and I'm also the visiting researcher at the University of New South Wales in Sydney of Australia. I got my PhD in 2014 in security, computer security from UNSW Australia, and from that time till now, I'm serving as the assistant professor at Ferdowsi University of Mashhad. Today, I'm going to talk about the general concepts in the security of computer systems. And let me start the talk, and if you have some questions, please don't hesitate to ask me the questions. Okay, in this talk, we will have, these are the table of contents that I will have to talk about them. At first, I will talk about the definition of computer security, what does the computer security mean, and the three principles of C, I, and A. At the end of this talk, I will talk about the scopes of security principles and security domains, which are authentication, access control, and encryption. Then I will go to authentication with more details. I will talk about how a user which is going to use a computer system is authenticated, which means that we make sure that this user has been registered before, and now he has the required credentials to log in and use the assets and the computer resources. And then I will talk about the access control, which is the second layer of the security, and show you that how and we can check and we can control the user's access to different computer resources. And then we will go through the encryption as the third and the last layer of security in a computer system. And we will talk about some principles of encryption, different types and classifications of encryption methodologies, and there are some challenges regarding the encryption. And at the end, I will end with the open issues and challenges in the area of computer security. Okay, let me first define computer security. What do we mean by security of a computer system? As you know, we in a computer system, we have some valuable piece of data or hardware, which are all generally called assets. So there are some assets which are the valuable pieces of software or hardware that we have in a system, which are of importance for us as a system owner, and we tend to keep these assets secure. So when we say that the computer system is secure, it means that for each and every system resource or for each and every valuable asset in the system, we want to provide three objectives or three security goals, which are integrity, availability, and confidentiality. So the computer security means protecting the system resources in order to obtain three objectives for each and every valuable asset, which are integrity, availability, and confidentiality. So let me explain these definitions with more detail. These are, they are called C, I, and A. C stands for confidentiality, I stands for integrity, and A stands for availability. By confidentiality, we means that we mean that the data that is going to be stored in the computer should be kept confidential, should be kept secret. It means that only those who are the owner of the data should be able to access the data, and no one rather than the data owner is able to access the data. The other aspect of confidentiality is privacy, which means that people or users who are using a computer system should make sure that their private and their confidential data are not disclosed to those who are not authorized to use them. The users should make sure that they have entire control on with whom their private data is shared and who has access to their private data. So one of these security goals that we should provide for resources in a computer system is to provide confidentiality, which means that only authorized entities should access these computer resources. The second goal is integrity. Integrity comes with the manipulation. And when we say that we have to provide integrity for a computer resource, it means that we should make sure that every modification that is going to be done on that resource should be done in an authorized manner. It means that only the people who are authorized to modify a resource. For example, you have a Microsoft Word document and you have shared it with your friends, and you want to be sure that only you and your friend are able to modify the content of the file. So when we say that the integrity for this file, for this Microsoft Word document is preserved, we mean that only those who are authorized to modify are able to do any modifications or any revisions on that resource. This is the concept of integrity, which is constitutes data integrity and system integrity, but the concept is similar. And the last principle is availability, which means that when we say that the system is secure, in respect to availability, it means that the system should be responding to the user's request 7 days a week and 24 hours a day. It means that system should be available all the time to serve the users, to give response to the users. So we mean that the system should not be denied of service. Nothing should prevent the system from responding to the user's requests. So if you want to make it brief, we say that a computer system is secure if we can satisfy these three goals: confidentiality, integrity, and availability for all the assets within the computer system. Okay, let's go deeper into the confidentiality. As I said, we have two concepts: data confidentiality, which means that the confidential or secret information should not be available or disclosed to those who are not authorized. And when we say privacy, which means that people or individuals who are using that computer system should make sure that they are under control of what information related to them are collected and stored, and with whom and with what level these informations are shared with others, are disclosed to others. This is the meaning of confidentiality. The second concept, as I explained, is integrity. As I said, it has two dimensions: data integrity and system integrity. When we talk about data integrity, we mean that all the information within a computer system, all the programs that are running on a computer system can only be changed in a specified and authorized manner. And no unauthorized user can change a program, a software, or the data. And when we talk about system integrity, our main focus is that the system is performing what it is intended to do that. If we design a system to do a specific job, the system should always do the same job, not something different. If the system is doing something different from what it is intended to do so, it means that its integrity has been violated. And the third principle and the third objective is the availability. As I said, we make sure that the system works promptly and the service is not denied to authorized users. Okay, now this is the main concept of computer security, and I hope that you got the basic idea if you haven't been familiar with it before. Now, in these two or three slides, I'm just going to emphasize on the importance of security and show that although we have had a great improvement in the computer technology, whether in software or the hardware, we are very less behind in the domain of security. Back to the World War II, there are electronic computers that they are aimed at doing cryptanalysis. At that time, there are some countries, they are struggling with each other, and they may send some cryptographic messages to their soldiers and to their commanders. And at that time, there are some computer systems that are invented in order to decrypt these messages by the enemies. So computer systems are back to the World War II. And after World War II, we have the numerical computation. In the decade of 1916 to 1980, we can see that the emergence of batch processing and mainframes in the decades of 1960, and in the decade of 1970s, we can see the emergence of local area networks, and in the decade of 1980s, we see the emergence of personal computing or PCs and the earliest stages of the internet. Between 1919 and to 1999, the commercial version of the World Wide Web is emerged, and in the decade of 2000s, we can see the emergence of social networks and ubiquitous computing, mobile computing. So as you see, every 10 years, we see a rapid jump in the improvement in the computer technology. But what about the security? These are 4 security issues that are reported by the industry and by the news, which has been happening in the 3 months of 2021. The first one is the SolarWinds, which is a software company. This company has been hacked by a group of hackers, which resulted in a great security breach that affected companies such as Microsoft and the US Department of Defense. Just pay attention that this has happened in the early 2021. The second one is a privacy breach that has happened in Twitter. And some of the famous people's accounts have been hacked, and some tweets have been sent from their site requesting to pay some money, for example, $100,000 US. And so a great security breach and a great hack of famous people accounts has been done in, I think it's in February 2021. And the third one, which has been done on the Zoom, as you know, because of the COVID-19, there are a rapid increase in the use of online meeting facilities such as Zoom, and there is a security breach in 50,000 user accounts in Zoom, and which has been sold in the dark web, and it enables users to join meetings without any invitation or interrupt any meeting or share inappropriate materials on the meeting, and the other one. So it means that although we have a great improvement in the computer technology, in the security, the situation is really shame. And we still are struggling with basic security issues and old security attacks. And all the companies and all the countries, the IT infrastructure of all companies are still vulnerable against these security issues. So I want to say that security is a major challenge, and it still is a major challenge and needs to be more emphasized in the research and also in the industry. Okay, why we are saying that computer security is hard? On one side, we have the programmers, who are writing the program, the code of most softwares, even though we have the operating systems which are coded by a group of programmers, yes? And normally programmers think that or assume that nothing will fail. Nothing will fail, and no security breach is going to happen in the program that they are writing the code. So this wrong assumption is one of the major issues, one of the major problems that we have in providing security for computer systems. On the other side, we have some random failures. For example, when you are sending a message through a network, it may happen that you are losing a message, the message is dropped or lost, or sometimes the machine is crashed, and so the computer is now vulnerable to hacks or vulnerable to security incidents. So there are random failures that make the computer system vulnerable to security breaches. Also, there are deliberate failures. There are attackers who are going to make use of vulnerabilities in your computer systems and run an attack on your system to obtain valuable information from your system, or to make it crash on your system, or degrade or damage the softwares or the computer resources. So there are also deliberate failures rather than the random failures. And also we have a group of challenges which are the act of God. For example, your system or your IT infrastructure may be encountering flood or earthquake, and you may lose all your data, or you may, for example, you may lose all the data or your valuable pieces of information or hardware, for example. So there are different aspects in the provision of computer security, and satisfying all the requirements is really hard. That's why computer security and providing the security for a computer system is really hard. Okay, now we are going to go deeper to the computer security and talk about different aspects and different scopes of computer security. There are a group of users who are going to use a computer system. The first layer of security that we are going to provide is to check that whether these users have been registered before or not. If the user hasn't been registered, so we may not let him come in. And after checking that the user has been registered before or not, we ask the user to provide us with some credentials or login information. So at the first layer of computer security, providing computer security, is called authentication, which means we should make sure that the user has been registered before and now is providing us with correct login information. Okay, now the user is authenticated, as now entered the system, and he is going to use our computer system. So he wants to have access to different resources, different resources in the system, for example, hardware resources, programs, applications, or software resources, and the data and information. Okay, the second layer of security is checking that which user had what kind of access to what resource. We won't let every user to have full access to all system resources. We have to check what user has what access to what resources. So before that time, we had to set some access control policies and access control rules to restrict access of users to sensitive computer resources. This is the second layer of security. And the third layer of security is cryptology or cryptography. Assume that an attacker is able to impersonate a user and passes the first and second layer of security. What should we do to keep our sensitive information? The third layer of security is encryption. We put a layer of encryption on sensitive data in order to make sure that if the attacker has passed the first or second layer of security, he is now encountering a file that is encrypted. And it's meaningless for him, and he cannot understand what is inside the file. So this is the third layer of encryption. And throughout this presentation, I will talk about these three layers: authentication, access control, and encryption. Okay, as I said, the first layer is authentication. By authentication, we mean that we are going to verify that the identity which is claimed by an entity is the real identity. This is the fundamental security building block. And by authentication, we have two steps, as I said. The first step, by authentication, we have two steps. The first step is identification, which means that we make sure that the user has a valid user ID, which means that the user has been registered before. Once the user inserts a correct user ID, the second step is the verification. We ask the user to provide us a password, for example, or a smart card, or a PIN number, something else. In that step, we want to verify that this user ID is binded with this credential, which can be password or a PIN number or a card, smart card, for example. So the first step is identification to verify the user ID, and the second step is verification, which verifies the bind between the user ID and, for example, the password. This is the basic of the authentication. There are different types of authentication. There are different means, there are different ways to authenticate a user. The first way is by something that the individual knows, has in his memory. For example, we ask the users to provide us with password or a PIN number, or we may ask the users to answer to some pre-arranged questions. So we rely on what the user knows, and he answers our question correctly. If he inserts his password correctly, or if he inserts the correct PIN number, we let him come in and use the system resources. So the first way of authenticating a user is relying on something that the user knows, and we assume that this is the only the user that knows his own password. No one rather than the user knows his password. The second type of authentication is based on something that the user possesses, something that the user has, for example, a smart card, a key, or anything, a token, for example, a hardware token. These are the things that the user has in his hand, and we assume that this is the only user that has this token to access this resource. The third type of authentication is based on static biometric characteristics of people, such as fingerprints, face, hand, or retina of the eye. And the fourth means of authentication is by the dynamic biometric of individuals. For example, their voice pattern, their handwriting, their typing rhyme, their signature, their fingerprint, their signatures or voice patterns or handwriting. These are the dynamic biometrics of people that can be used for authentication. And here we assume that people have unique fingerprints, people have unique handwriting and unique signatures, and so basic features are extracted from these biometric parameters, and they are compared with what the user is entering once he's going to be authenticated. The most famous way of authentication is password authentication, and as you all are familiar with that, this is the widely used line of defense against intrusions. When you are going to authenticate a user by password, you ask the user to enter a login, a user ID, and the password, and the system then compares the password and with the password that has been stored once the user has been registered. And if they are the same, the user is authenticated. this is, let me just explain this one. This is how a password is stored in the system. There is a password table in the operating system, and which is stored in the computer system. In this password table, the administration stores the user ID and the password. But the password is not stored in the plain text as the user is entering it. The password is going to be hashed. In fact, the password is going to be combined with a random number, and then it's going to be hashed. And the hashed value of the password is going to be stored in the table. So for each and every user, we have a row in this table. In this row, the user ID and the hashed password of that user is stored. And once these values are stored in the password table, this table is used for the authentication. So this is the simplest way of authenticating a user by a password. But there are some vulnerabilities in a password authentication, which I will explain it very shortly. One of the very famous attacks in the domain of password authentication is the dictionary attack. You may have heard about it. By dictionary attack, the problem with password authentication is that normally people select easy passwords. For example, ABC 123. Or, for example, a combination of their name and their, for example, birth date. Or, for example, a combination of their mother's name or the year of, for example, the birth year of their child or other things. So because remembering the password is difficult, people normally use easy passwords. So one way to breach the authentication and break the authentication level is to make a table, which is called a rainbow table, store all the common and easy passwords in it, as many as possible. This is the rainbow table, which is so rainbow table includes all possible easy and common passwords that people normally use and select all around the world. And then the attacker tries to have access to this password table and checks the password of the users against those common passwords. And if he finds a similarity or a uniqueness, it means that the password of that user is hacked. So we have the dictionary attack, in which the password of the users which are stored in the password table are compared with the common and easy passwords which are stored in the rainbow table. And if there is a match, so that user ID and the password of that user ID is being hacked. This is one of the very famous attacks that still is applicable. This is the main problem. This is the easiest attack in the domain of authentication, password authentication, which is still applicable to computer systems. There are other attacks as well, which because of the lack of time, I will not go through them. But as I said, the main problem is with password authentication is just selecting easy passwords by the users. And this is a graph that shows that the number of, the percentage of passwords that are guessed after a given number of guesses. For example, you are beginning to guess passwords against a single user ID. For example, you know the user ID of a user. For example, the user ID is Amintoosi, and you are going to check simple uncommon passwords on this user ID. For example, at first you enter ABC123. If it's okay, you are successful. If not, you try, for example, 123 ABC, and then if not successful, you try the for example, the hello word, hello password, for example, the word. This is the brute force attack, which means that checking all possible kinds of passwords against a single user ID. And this graph shows that After, for example, 10 to the power of 13, almost 50% of the passwords are able to be cracked, which means this is a great number. 50% of passwords are going to be cracked after 10 to the power of 13 guesses. And generating 10 to the power of 13 guesses by a supercomputer is not that much difficult. Another type of authentication is biometric authentication. Just want to have a short review of that. In this type of authentication, we authenticate users based on their unique physical characteristics, such as their fingerprints, hand geometry, retinal pattern, iris, their signature, their voice, and their facial characteristics. The issue with biometric authentication is that it is technically complex and expensive. It needs special hardware and software and is not applicable to all domains and to all fields for authentication. But it is more secure than password authentication because it depends on your biometric, static and dynamic biometric features of the users, which are not able to be copied or cracked or, for example, reverse engineered. So biometric authentication is now going to be used in vaster areas, but because of its complexity and its expensiveness, there are still some barriers against its widespread usage. So as we talked about the security layers, we now finished with the authentication, and now we are going to talk about the second layer, which is the access control. So when the user is authenticated and he is now logged into the system, we have to make sure that what are the access rights or the privileges that this user has in order to access the assets or the computer resources. So we need the access control policy, which has been set before, which this policy describes of who may access what resource and how. So there are a group of users. We can make levels in these users. For example, some of the users are administrators, some of the are normal users, registered users, and some users are guests. And for different levels of users, we may restrict access to different resources. This is the access control policy, which describes such limitations and descriptions. So now we are going to go more deep to the access control. In an access control system, we have three elements or three entities. There is a subject, which is a user, as we called it before, which is a user who is able or who intends to access resource. So we have a subject, which is a user who wants to access. We have an object, which is the resource, which is a access controlled resource. I mean that the resource which is not open to all. It has some restrictions and some limitations to be accessed. So this is the object or the resource. And the third element is the access right or the privilege. As I said, the policy, which describes the way in which a subject may access an object. Based on these three elements, all the access control systems are setting the rules and limiting the access of different types of users to system resources. Okay, there we have four access control policies. I'm just going to describe very shortly. The first one is just called Discretionary Access Control or DAC. The second one is Mandatory Access Control. The third one is Role-Based. And the fourth one is Attribute-Based. Discretionary access control is what we normally see in our daily life, in our computers, in our PCs or laptops. In this type of access control, the access rights or privileges are given to the users based on the user IDs. For each and every user with a specific and unique user ID, it has been defined that what access rights he or this user ID has to what resources. this is a scheme of a typical discretionary access control matrix or access matrix. As you can see, in the rows, you see different users with different user IDs, and in the columns, you see different objects or different resources, which are file 1, file 2, file 3, and file 4. And in each cell of this table, you can see different access types of users. For example, user A is the owner of file 1, and he is able to read the content of the file 1, and he is also able to write into the file 1. Make changes into the file 1. Or, for example, user B is only able to read file 4. Or user C is only able to read file 2. So he cannot write in file 2, or he is not the owner of the file 2. So for each and every user with a unique user ID, we define the different types of accesses to different objects. This is a discretionary access control. And the main point is that in this type of access control, a user is able to pass his own permissions to other users in specific circumstances. So sometimes you have a file, you are the owner of a file, but you want to share it with your friend and want to give him full access to that file. So you want to pass your full permissions, which is reading, writing, and making any changes to that file. You want to pass all your full permissions to your friend so that he can also do whatever he wants on that file. So in this type of access control, users are able to pass their own permissions to other ones if they desire to do so. A good example of discretionary access control is what we have in Unix access control. In the Unix file access control, there are 3 groups of users. The first one is the owner of the resource. The second group of user is the group that this user belongs to that. And the third type of user is the others, rather than the owner and rather than the group members. So in the Unix file access control, we have these 3 types of users. And for each user, we have 3 types of access. Read, which is defined by the letter R. Write, which is defined by the letter W. And execute, which is defined by the letter X. So when you want to give full access to another user, you set the bits read, write, and execute to 1. If you want to limit, for example, the access to a file only to read, you set the R bit to 1 and put the other bits to 0. So associated with each file, there are 9 bits, 3 for user, 3 for the owner, 3 for the group that the owner is a member, and 3 for others. And each of these 3 bits defines the read access, write access, or the execute address access. So in this way, you can manage the file access, and you can restrict the access to this file by other people or other users rather than the owner of that file. So this is a practical example of discretionary access control. The second type of access control is mandatory access control, which is used in military systems when you have different types of documents based on their security. For example, you have top secret documents, confidential documents, or unclassified documents. And you want to restrict access to these documents based on the level of the people who are in. For example, the commander can only access, the commander is able to access all types of the document. What a soldier is only able to access, for example, unclassified documents. So when you have different levels for documents based on their security, and different levels for the users based on their level in the, for example, in an organization. So you need a more careful security principle, access control principle, which is called mandatory access control, in which there is a central manager who sets the rules and specifies who can access to what type of document. And despite, contrast to the previous one, the user cannot pass his own privileges to other users. This is the central manager who defines the access control policies. This type of access control policy is useful for military situations, for governments, for national security agencies, or the places that the documents are really critical and sensitive in terms of security. The third type of access control is role-based access control. For example, in this type, there is one entity that is between the user and the access rights, which is the role. When you log into a system, you are assigned a role. For example, your role can be the student, you can be the supervisor, you can be assistant professor, associate professor, you can be, for example, the dean of faculty, you can be, for example, the vice president. These are the different types of roles within an organization. So when you log into a system, you are assigned a role. For example, if you're a student and you log in with your student ID, so you are logged in as a student. And there are a predefined set of access rights that are defined for students. For example, students can access these rooms, the students can access these sources, these resources, these files, these hardwares, these places, these areas. So when you log in as a student, you are assigned the role of the student, and so all the access rights that have been preset for the student are assigned to you. And if, for example, if you are logged in as the dean of a faculty, all the access rights that have been set for the dean of the faculty, for the role of the dean of the faculty, are assigned to you by default. So instead of giving access to each and every user based on his user ID, we set roles for the users, and we set access rights for roles instead of users. So once the user is assigned the roles, he inherits all the access rights that has been set for that role. This is the role-based access control. And this figure shows the details of this type. As you can see, in the left part, there are users who are assigned some roles. And in the right part, there are some resources which are accessed by the roles. So you assign the roles to the users, and you just have previously mentioned that which role has which access to what type of resources. This type of access control is more flexible and more practical than the first and second one, discretionary as mandatory. And the fourth one, which I will skip, is the attribute-based access control, which wants to go deeper to the access control policies and wants to include the environmental situations within the access control policies. For example, in a default situation, you may set that, for example, students are not able to access, for example, the university resources on weekends. This is the access control policy, okay? Students are not able to access the university, for example, library on weekends. But sometimes you want to give some extra permissions to specific type of students. For example, you may say that students who are, for example, postgrad students who are at the year of 3 or 4, 3 and above, for example, can use the university library on weekends. So you are giving some more flexibility to the rules. You do not assuming 0 or 1. You say that although the students are not allowed to use the university library on weekends, we give more flexibility to the rule, and we say that postgraduate students who are on the year 3 or above can access the university library on, for example, Fridays as well. So you are giving more flexibility by assigning some attributes to the users and set the rules based on these attributes. For example, you said students who are postgraduate students, this is the attribute. Or who are in the year 3 or above, this is the attribute. So you are setting some attributes for objects or for subjects, and based on different types of attributes that the objects or subjects can have, you are setting the different access rules, access policies. So it gives you a plethora of situations that you can set the access policies, and it gives a great amount of flexibility. This type of the access control policy is the most comprehensive and most flexible one, but has not been used in practice. Normally it is in theory. Okay, now we are finished with the second layer of defense. The first layer was the authentication. We talked about how the users are authenticated. There are four, as I said, there are 4 means of authentication. We talked more about password authentication and how the password is stored in the system and how it is retrieved. Then we went to access control, which is the second layer of this defense. We talked about different types of access controls, which are discretionary, mandatory access control, role-based, and attribute-based. And now we are going to talk about the third layer of defense, which is the encryption. As you may know, there are 2 aims for the encryption. For example, assume that there are 2 parties who are exchanging some private messages, and we want to use encryption, and we want to encrypt the message in order to make sure that the privacy of the message is preserved and the integrity of the message is preserved as well. By message privacy, we mean that no one rather than the sender of the message and the receiver of the message are able to read the content of the message. So we use encryption to ensure that the privacy of the message is preserved. No one rather than the sender is receiver, and receiver is able to read the message. And by encryption, we have another goal, which is preserving the integrity of the message. As I said before, integrity is coupled with manipulation. We want to make sure that no one rather than the sender and the receiver is able to modify the message. No one rather than the sender and receiver is able to manipulate the message, to change the content of the message. So we want to preserve the privacy and integrity of every exchange message by using encryption. This is identical for different resources that we have in the computer. For example, if we have a Microsoft Word document, we want to make sure that the privacy of the document is preserved. No one can read the document rather than the owner of the file. And we want to make sure that the integrity of the document is preserved. No one rather than the owner is able to modify the content of the file. So we may use encryption to encrypt the file to preserve these 2 goals. So in an encryption system, there are typically 5 ingredients, 5 elements. The text or the message or the file that is going to be encrypted is called the plain text. So the plain text is the original text that is going to be encrypted. We have an encryption algorithm that makes some changes on the text, on the plain text, to make it irreadable, to make it, as I said, shuffle it to make it confusable. We have a secret key, which is used for encryption as the second parameter rather than the encryption algorithm. The output of encryption is called the ciphertext, which is the scrambled message, the shuffled message. So the plain text is converted to the ciphertext by the encryption algorithm and by using the secret key. And once the message is the ciphertext or the encrypted message is received, At the destination, it should be decrypted. So we need a decryption algorithm, which is the reverse of the encryption algorithm, that is applied on the ciphertext in order to create the original message or the plain text at the destination. So these are the five components of an encryption system: plain text, encryption algorithm, secret key, ciphertext, and decryption algorithm. Okay, before going ahead to the encryption, we just want to discuss the classification of encryption systems. There are three domains or three factors that this classification can be done based on that. The first parameter is the type of operations that transforms this plain text to the ciphertext. Sometimes encryption algorithms use substitution. For example, they substitute each and every character B to with character, for example, Z. Or they substitute each character D, for example, with character Y. Some encryption algorithms use substitution to transform the plain text into the ciphertext. Other groups of encryption algorithms may prefer doing transposition. By transposition, we mean shuffling the text, which means that changing the places of the letters. Instead of substituting a letter to another letter, just change their places. For example, change the place of letter 2 to letter 9 of the text. And by this shuffling, you are transforming a plain text to an scrambled message, which is cannot be understood, which is called the ciphertext. So based on whether the encryption algorithm does substitution or transposition as the base, there are different types of encryption systems. The second parameter is the number of keys that are used for encryption. Some encryption algorithms use the same key for encryption at the source and for decryption at the destination. Other algorithms have two different types of keys. One key is used for encryption and the second key is used for decryption. So based on the number of keys that are used, there are different types of encryption algorithms. And the third parameter is the way that the plain text is processed. For example, if you have a message which is, for example, 1 kilobyte size, you may divide it into, for example, 20 byte blocks, 20 byte, 20 byte, 20 byte blocks, and encrypt each block separately and just concat these encrypted blocks together to make the final ciphertext. Or you may encrypt each and every bit continuously, which is called the stream cipher, sorry. So you may face the plain text as blocks of data, or you may face the plain text as a stream of data. These are different types of encryption algorithms. Okay, as the first parameter, as I said, the encryption algorithm may use substitutions or transpositions to transform the plain text to the ciphertext. One of the oldest encryption algorithms is Caesar cipher, which is used in Roman wars before the worldwide of wars. Okay, in the Caesar cipher, each letter of the plain text is substituted by K letters, K forward letters. For example, if we select K to be 2, number 2, each letter in the plain text is substituted by the second letter after that. For example, A is going to be substituted by C. B is going to be substituted by D, 2 letters ahead. C is going to be substituted by E. D is going to be substituted by F, and so on. This is the process of encryption. So you select a K, which is the number of letters that should be gone ahead. And when you want to encrypt a message, you shift each letter of that message forward by K places. As I said, if K is 2, you shift A by 2, which is C. So A is substituted by C, B is substituted, for example, by E, and so on. This is the process of encryption. And when you want to decrypt the message, you just shift back K places. For example, when the ciphertext or the encrypted message is received at the destination, the receiver just shifts back each letter by K letters, K places, to reach to the original message or the plain text. This is the basic that has, it is the technique that has been used, that has been used in the Caesar cipher, which is an ancient encryption algorithm. This is a simple algorithm which can be cryptanalyzed and which can be defeated very easily. You should just guess different numbers for K, and the K only has 25 different possible values. So you can easily check different values for K and try to decrypt the ciphertext. And if you reach to a meaningful plaintext, it means that you are successful at guessing the correct K value of K. This is the only simple example of substitution ciphers. And this is a more complex example of substitution ciphers. In this example, for each and every letter of the alphabet, you select a substitution letter, a substituted letter. For example, for A, you define to be substituted by J. For B, you define to be substituted by I, and so on. There is no pattern between the letters in the plaintext and the letters in the ciphertext. So there is no single K to be guessed, and no specific pattern between these substitutions. So in this case, it is more difficult to decrypt the message by the attacker. And this is what the substitution ciphers do. They select a candidate for each and every letter, and at the destination, they just substitute the letters of the plaintext with these candidates, and at the destination, they just substitute back these letters to obtain the original message. The second type of transformation is, as I said, transposition, in which you shuffle the message. You do not substitute letters, but you just change their places. For example, if the plaintext is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you shuffle it to 4, 3, 5, 1, 6, 7, 2. So they shuffle the message at the source, and then you will reshuffle the message at the destination. So the technique for shuffling should be agreed between the sender and the receiver before message exchange. This is the same for the substitution cipher. The value of key should be exchanged between two parties before any message exchange. So both parties should agree on the key. This is the key, as I said. This is the key. The K is the key of the encryption. The value of key should be transferred, should be exchanged, or should be agreed upon between two parties of the communication. This is the transposition. So it doesn't substitute the letters, but changes their places and shuffles it in place. This is the simple example of that. The second type of classification is, as I said, based on how you encounter the plaintext, whether you see the plaintext as blocks of data, or whether you see it as the stream. The first group of encryption algorithms are called block ciphers. They divide the plaintext into identical blocks, two same size blocks, and then encrypt each block separately, and then concat the encrypted blocks together to make the final ciphertext. This is the principle, this is the process that has been done in block ciphers. As you can see in the left figure, this is the Friesel structure. It selects a block of data, divides it into two halves, left half and the right half, and then makes some substitutions and transpositions on the data and shuffles it in order to make the right half and the left half of the ciphertext block. And it repeats this process with the second block, the third block, and so on, to create the blocked ciphertext. And these blocks are then joined together to form the final ciphertext. This is the basic for block ciphers. On the other hand, we have stream ciphers who treat the plaintext as a stream of bytes. So each and every byte is going to be encrypted and transferred to the destination. This is the basic of stream ciphers. As you can see in this slide, we have a key, which is the parameter for encryption. This key is applied to a pseudo-random key generator, which generates a small key, and this small k is going to be XORed with the byte of the plaintext to create a byte in the ciphertext. So each and every byte is going to be encrypted rather than blocks. So this is the basic of stream ciphers. So here we talked about different types of transformations, substitutions, or transpositions. For substitution, we talk about the Caesar ciphers and the general substitution ciphers. And for transposition, we make an example of how the places of the letters can be exchanged. The second classification, the third classification, which is based on whether we process this plaintext on blocks or based on the bits or the bytes, which are block ciphers or stream ciphers, and we discuss them here. This is the basic concept of block ciphers, and this is the basic principle of stream ciphers. And the third parameter that is used for classification is the number of keys. As I said, some schemes, some encryption schemes use the same key for encryption and for the decryption, and some techniques use different keys, which are asymmetric encryption algorithms. And now we are going to discuss these different types. Okay, by symmetric encryption, we mean the encryption algorithms that use only one key for encryption and for decryption as well. As you can see in this picture, the plaintext is going to be fed into the encryption algorithm, and there is a key at the source, in the sender's part, which is used to encrypt the message, and the ciphertext is generated, and the ciphertext is transmitted to the destination. At the right hand of this figure, you can see the process that is performed at the destination. So at the destination, the decryption algorithm is run on the ciphertext with the same key, and the plaintext is going to be obtained, which is going to be delivered to the destination, to the receiver. So there is a secret key, there is a shared key, which is the same for the sender and for the receiver, which has been shared between them before this communication. So one single key is used for encryption and for decryption in the sender part and in the receiver part. This is the basic of symmetric encryption. On the other hand, we have asymmetric encryption, in which different keys are used in different parts. In this type of encryption, we have two keys. One is called the public key. As its name says, it is public. For example, I will have a public key which is accessible by all those who want to send message to me. And also I have a private key which is in the possession of me, and no one rather than me is able to access my private key. So one of these keys, which is the public key, is normally used for the encryption. If, for example, someone else is going to send me a message, it will encrypts the message with my public key, which is known to everyone, and sends that encrypted message to me. And because that message is encrypted by my public key, I'm able to decrypt that message by my private key. And this is me, only me, who is able to decrypt the message. So I have the private key, so I will decrypt the message, and I read the content of the message. This is the principle of asymmetric encryption. So one key is used for encryption, and the second key is used for the decryption. And as I said, the public keys are available for everyone. So each user has a ring of public keys of those who he or she wants to send messages to them. And for example, if Alice is going to send some message to Bob, he encrypts the message by Bob's public key and sends it to Bob. And when the message is received to Bob, Bob is able to decrypt the message by his private key and read the content of the message. And because no one rather than Bob has his own public key, no one is able to read the content of the message rather than Bob. So if someone listens to the communication line and sniffs the messages that are passing through the communication line, even if this eavesdropper, even if this attacker obtains the message, he cannot read the content of the message because the message is encrypted by Bob's public key. Mm-hmm. And this user does not have the private key of Bob, so he cannot decrypt the message and read the content of the message. This is the basic principle of asymmetric encryption. There are some challenges in the process of encryption. As we said, in the symmetric encryption, there is only one key that is used for encryption at the sender and for decryption at the receiver. So this single key should be shared between the sender and the recipients before the communication. So we have the challenge of key distribution. How can we exchange the key in a secure manner? If the communication link is secure, it means that we do not need any encryption because we can send a message on the secure line. If the communication link is not secure, how can we exchange the key between the sender and the receiver before the communication? This is a main problem for symmetric encryption systems because only there is a one key, and this key should be exchanged before these two parts. And when the line is when the line is insecure, this is a problem. How can we exchange this key between these two parties? This problem is called key distribution, which is delivering the key to two parties that wish to exchange data without allowing others to see the key. So, because if we exchange the key on the line, everyone who is listening to the line is able to obtain the key. So there should be a solution for the key distribution problem in the symmetric encryption algorithm. Okay, as I said, you may think that, okay, Alice is going to have some secure communication with Bob. Alice is going to send a message to Bob on an insecure channel. The communication channel is not secure. And Alice is going to use symmetric encryption to encrypt her message. But Alice should exchange the key before starting the communication. The non-solution, the solution that comes to my mind at first is that, okay, Alice sends Bob the key first, and then Alice encrypts the message with that same key and sends the encrypted message to Bob as well. In that case, Bob has received the key before, and now he has received the encrypted message, so he runs the decryption algorithm, decrypts the message by the same key, and obtains the plain text. But the problem is, as I said before, is that because the line is insecure, so someone who is eavesdropping, who is listening to the line, which is called Eve, he is also able to capture all the messages that are exchanged on this channel. So Eve also obtains the key and obtains the encrypted message that Alice has sent to Bob. And Eve, who is the eavesdropper, runs the decryption algorithm and computes the plain text. So exchanging the key as it is on an insecure channel is not a good solution because it reveals the key for the attacker, for the eavesdropper. In order to solve the key exchange problem, Diffie and Hellman, who are two scientists, proposed a solution. I'm not going to go to the details of their solutions, but their solutions is based on the idea of that. Instead of exchanging the secret key on the insecure channel, Alice and Bob exchanged some public information on the channel and then try to generate the key locally at their sites. As you can see at the end of this picture, at the bottom of this picture, no secret key is exchanged. What is exchanged on the line is the public keys. Alice is sending her own public key to Bob, and Bob is sending his own public key to Alice. What happens is that Alice and Bob are calculating the key, the shared key, on their own side by using these public keys that are exchanged on the insecure channel. So the shared key is not exchanged. The shared key is calculated locally. So there is no need to exchange the key. What is exchanged is the public information, which are the public keys of Alice and Bob, which are publicly available and make no threats if are obtained by the eavesdropper, by the attacker. So Diffie-Hellman key exchange is the protocol which is going to address the key distribution problem by letting the two parties to generate the key locally in their own sites without needing to exchange the shared key. But the Diffie-Hellman key exchange solution has one problem. The problem is called the man-in-the-middle attack. As you see in the previous slide, Alice and Bob send their public keys to each other. So the public key of Alice and Bob are exchanged on this insecure channel. And the key is calculated based on these public keys that are received from the other parties. So if the Mallory is the one who is sitting in the middle of the line and who is listening to the line and capturing all the messages that are exchanged between Alice and Bob. So assume that Alice tells Bob that, hey Bob, I'm going to send you a secret. So please send me your public key, what is suggested by Diffie-Hellman. Alice asks Bob to send his public key to her. And Bob says, hi Alice, this is my public key, KB. So Bob sends his public key to Alice. But what happens in the middle? Mallory is sitting between the line, so he captures Bob's public key and keeps it for himself and sends his own public key instead to Alice. So Mallory sends his own public key to Alice. Alice receives a public key. Alice thinks that or expects that the key that he is receiving is Bob's public key. So she encrypts the message by the key and sends it back to the Bob. But the key that Alice has received is not Bob's key, is the Mallory's key. and Alice has encrypted the message with Mallory's public key. So when she sends the encrypted message back to the Bob, Mallory again captures the message, and Mallory is now able to decrypt the message because the message has been encrypted by his own public key. So he decrypts the message by his own private key, read the content of the message, and when he obtains the information within the message, he again encrypts the message with Bob's public key and now sends the message to Bob. Bob receives the message which has been encrypted by his own public key, so Bob decrypts the message by his private key and reads the message. And neither Alice nor Bob recognize that their message has been read by someone in the middle, by Mallory. This is the man-in-the-middle attack, which is the attack that can be applied on Diffie-Hellman solution. The problem arises because there is no way that Alice makes sure that the key that she's going to receive is Bob's public key, not someone else's public key. This is the problem for Diffie-Hellman solution. So we need a way to make sure that the key that we are receiving is the one that we are expecting to receive, not from someone else. Okay, so in order to solve this problem, the public key certificates have been designed. In this certificate, there is a central authority, there is a central decision center, which generates some certificates for public key. The same as birth certificate. For your birth certificate, you have your name, your family name, your father's name, your mother's name, and also a national number, yes, or a certificate number, birth certificate number. The public key certificate is the same. In this certificate, there is the user ID of a user, for example, Bob's user ID, and Bob's public key. And this is a certificate which has been validated by the certificate authority. So when Alice and Bob are going to make some communications, Alice asks Bob to send his own public key. And Bob now sends his public key certificate to Alice. The certificate includes the Bob's ID, the Bob's public key, and this is a valid certificate which has been certified, which has been signed by a certificate authority. So when Alice receives the public key certificate of Bob, and when he checks the validity of the certificate, now Alice can be sure that this public key belongs to Bob and not to someone else. So for solving the challenge of man-in-the-middle attack in key distribution problem, the public key certificates have been designed, as you can see in this picture. On the left-hand side of this picture, you see a certificate. The name of the person who obtains this certificate is, for example, Mario Rossi. And for example, he is from the organization of Wikimedia, and the public key, which has been depicted in a green color, is within the certificate. This is the unsigned certificate. The certificate is delivered to the certificate authority. This authority, this center, verifies the identity of the Mario Rossi, and the correctness of the public key, verifies the identity and the correctness of the public key, and then encrypts this certificate, signs this certificate, validates it, and give it back to the Mario Rossi. So now, as you can see on the right side of the picture, there is a signed certificate for Mario Rossi, in which you can see his name, his address, his country, the validity period of the certificate, and the public key of Mario Rossi. And at the end, you can see the signature of the certificate authority, which validates the certificate, which shows that the certificate is valid. And this certificate is now can be presented to anyone who wants to exchange messages with Mario Rossi. So for example, if Alice wants to send some messages to Bob, he asks the public key certificate of Bob. Bob should provide him such kind of certificate. Alice, once the public key certificate of Bob is received to Alice, Alice verifies the validity of the certificate, and if verified, she can now use the certificate and the public key within it to send some messages to Bob without being hesitant about whether someone is listening to the line or someone is just sending his own public key instead of Bob's public key. Okay, I will reach to the end of my presentation. What I said till now is that we talked about the meaning of computer security, which was preserving or obtaining or providing three objectives: confidentiality, integrity, and availability for all software, hardware, and other resources in a computer system. We defined the meaning of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Then we went through the scope of computer security and talked about three lines of defenses. The first line was authentication, which makes sure that the user which is going to log into the system has registered before and is now entering the valid login details. The second line of defense was access control. We talked about the access control policies, which define what types of users can access to what resources in what way, in what level. We talked about 4 different access control policies: discretionary access control policies, which are based on user IDs. We talked about role-based access control policies, which are based on roles. Mandatory access control, which are used in military systems, and attribute-based access control policies, which are aimed to add more flexibility to policies. And then we went through the third line of defense, which was encryption. We assume that an attacker is able to pass the first and second line of defense. In order to make sure that he cannot obtain the sensitive information, we use encryption to protect our sensitive data and information. We talked about different aspects of encryption algorithms, whether they shuffle the text or they just substitute their letters, whether they encounter the plain text in blocks, or they just do the encryption continuously byte by byte, or whether they use one single key for encryption and decryption, or whether they use different keys for encryption and decryption. And we then talked about the key distribution problem, because this is the main challenge in symmetric encryption, exchanging a single key on an insecure channel between the sender and receiver. We talked about the Diffie-Hellman solution, which is aimed at generating the single key locally at 2 parties instead of exchanging them. Then we talked about man-in-the-middle attack, which is the attack that is applicable on the Diffie-Hellman solution. And then we talked about the necessity for the public key certificate in order to address the man-in-the-middle attack, and which is widely used nowadays in secure communications. And as a final slide, I just want to talk about some research areas in the domain of computer security. You may have been familiar with IoT, Internet of Things, and the different IoT sensors that we can face in nowadays lives. Many intelligent homewares are equipped with IoT sensors, and you see that you know that the IoT sensors have limited capacity and processing power and storage capacity. So and also IoT systems and IoT environment is hugely susceptible to different security attacks. And the main reason is that the sensors have limited capacity, so encryption schemes cannot normally be used for IoT sensors because encryption systems require a complex complex computations and require a great amount of data to be stored in the sensors. So providing security for IoT environment is a great challenge that is now being addressed in different research areas. The second research area in the domain of security is blockchain. If you may be familiar with that, blockchain is a distributed ledger that is going to provide us with a distributed trust or distributed security. And the use of blockchain in different domains and providing soft security concepts such as trust is another hot topic in the research of security. The integration of artificial intelligence and security is also a hot topic. Many researchers around the world are talking to make, are working on making use of AI benefits in the domain of security. Automotive hacking also is a great challenge. You see that every day Tesla is presenting a new automotive car which doesn't need any driver to move, and hacking such automotive vehicles is a great challenge for the success of automotive transportation. And dealing with these hacking attempts is a great research area. Ransomwares are also a group of malwares who are encrypting your files and ask money instead of giving you the decryption key. And the usage of malware is a great problem for organizations and companies all around the world, and how to deal with ransomware is a great challenge, and which researchers are dealing with that. And the cyber warfare is also a great problem. You know that there are different countries who have intelligence systems, and they may employ hackers to make some problems on the enemies, on the other countries' infrastructures, for example, oil or gas. A few years ago, there was a cyber attack from Israel and US to the nuclear facilities of Iran, which is called Stuxnet. I'm not sure whether you have heard about it or not. It has a great damage on the nuclear power of Iran government. So the cyber warfare and the cyber security attacks among the countries are also also have a great impact on the social and economical situation of countries, and are a great research area that are being studied in research groups in all around the world. So these are various security research areas that are worth investigating. And as I said before at the beginning of my presentation, despite many developments in the technology of computer, we are very, very low in the progress in the domain of security. And many researchers are need to be done, and many students are needed to work on different security researchers. And even in the if you want to consider the income of the security engineers, they normally have good or high level of income, because their specialist is needed in all over the country in different governments and in different organizations. So I suggest all the students to pay attention, and if they are interested, study security as their future research areas. Okay, my presentation has now finished. Sorry if I have some misspelling sometimes, or if you have not understood some parts. I'm ready to have questions. If there is any question, I'm glad to answer.
Thank you for presentation. And an encryption that classified as substitution, Caesar algorithm.
بله. Yes.
And if we have the letter have index plain text like X, Y, Z, and
Yes.
we have the key like 5. What a new ciphertext? How?
Okay. If the key is 5, you mean that you should exchange each word with 5 letter forward, yes? So you have to think of a circular alphabetic order. For example, you think that we have A, after that we have B, C, and until to Z, and after Z we have again A, again B, C, D, and again until to Z, and again A, B. So when we say that we are going to substitute each letter by 5 letter ahead, so X is going to be substituted by C, yes, Y, Z, A, B, C, and E, sorry, yes, and Y is going to be substituted by F, and so on. So you would think of a circular order of alphabets.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Any other question?
I don't have a question. I just want to say thanks for this useful information, and we appreciate the way you present the lecture. So thank you.
Thank you so much. My main goal was that you make familiar with the basic concepts. I didn't have any knowledge about your basic information about the computer security. That's why I started from the beginning, and I'm sorry if some of them are repetitive for you, or there are some of the concepts maybe so easy. I just want to make you familiar with the concept of the security, and if you are eager to know more about it, you can send me some emails. I will send you some more materials and resources and ebooks so that you expand your knowledge about the security. Any other question? Okay, this is my email address, amintoosi@um.ac.ir, and this is my homepage, amintoosi.profcmsumacir. You can just refer to my homepage or just send me an email if you want to have more communication with each other. For a few semesters, I have students from Iraq, international students from Iraq. Some of them are master's students and some of them are PhD students. So we have good interactions with each other. Some of them are now graduated, but still we are in contact with each other. When they go to Imam Hussein Shrine, they just send me some pictures from that and say hello instead of me, and that's why I really like to see you more and have more communications with you. So I think that's enough for today. Thanks again for listening to me, and just send me email if you have any other question. خدا نگهدار.